Hello everyone, I'm Shemcat and I've never done a speedrun of a Resident Evil game, but I decided I wanted to play through Resident Evil 4 on stream and learn the speedrun, but with a limitation compared to what I was used to. I'm only allowed to play for 7 days. This is naturally going to be quite the disadvantage, since it'll really be impossible to get a good grasp over everything in such a short stretch of time. The other issue is, I have to work out how to balance learning and practicing everything, alongside actually getting the attempts in, meaning that as well as managing and optimizing my time within the game, I had to do this outside of the game as well. But of course, there were no rules from stopping me from planning this challenge, which is where Day 0 came into play. Learning a speedrun without actually knowing what category you'll be doing is like going to school with no idea what subjects you're studying. All that history knowledge won't do you much good when you're actually here for maths. Now RE4R has a massive amount of different options with its category selection, but for this challenge I decided to do NMG Standard on the PC since that's the only version I own. NMG stands for No Major Glitches, which is the term for categories which only have a few relatively small glitches, which is usually only used when the main any percent category has a lot of game breaking stuff, which yeah, this game definitely does. The reason I chose standard mode is because that was how I finished playing the game casually the other day, and so I felt it was more fitting than jumping into the deep end with professional mode. I also made sure to get all my other speedrun essentials, like setting up my timer and making sure I've read up on all the category rules, so from there I was able to start my learning on day 1. For the first day of this challenge, I learnt the basics of the first half of the run, from getting to the village all the way up until the castle. I made sure to pay attention to some of the little pieces of time save that will save time across the run, such as shooting or stabbing boxes to get loot, rather than using Leon's roundhouse kick. Rather than using the RTA method of timing, where you start the timer at the start of the run and go until the end without pausing, Resident Evil 4 uses the in-game timer, which will pause when in a cutscene, during loading times, and most importantly, when the game is paused. This gives way to the tech of pause buffering, where you pause before taking a shot to make sure it's accurate. The advantage of this is getting faster and more precise aiming in a game where the resources are pretty scarce. Of course this is a nice helping hand, but if you have, as the merchant put it, a lack of skill, this will only take you so far, and I was losing a ton of bullets compared to runs I was watching to learn from. Of course, this isn't too much of an issue when I can just go out of my way to break a few boxes to get more, but the issues were coming when my poor aim was leading to my death. Take the Chapter 5 chat segment with Luis, where I died a lot, mostly just because I was unable to get through the Ganados fast enough. Luckily through most of the run, our enemies are too sluggish to do much to us if we just run straight past them, but segments where we had to fight groups of enemies always proved to be quite tricky for me. This became clear in the first major segment of the run, where we fight them off in the village before bingo. The strategy here is to take a few guys down outside, run into the house and pick up a grenade. Ideally they'll all be hit in an explosion and the others will realise it's time for bingo. However, I died here. A lot. My inability to stay alive was even more apparent in the waterhole in Chapter 7, where I got beaten up over and over again. I did an attempt up to the end of Chapter 7 away from my stream, and I died so many times that the game tried to put me into assisted mode. Just insulting. On a lighter note, the first day of learning also introduced us to Ashley and the segments with her. From the outside it seems these parts could be very slow and tedious, but she mostly just allowed us to run through the packs of enemies without too much trouble. Even if she does get grabbed, usually you can just get to an autosave, and then from there reload the file. When you do this, Ashley will be out of their grasp and can join you again. Once I had gotten through Chapter 7, I decided I had made some good progress and was going to stop for the day. We could continue learning during Day 2. I returned the next day with a renewed spirit and was prepared to learn some more segments, starting instantly with the precise shot here in order to open the gate from the other side. We do this quite a bit with opening locks, and even just straight up shoot through a door to break a lock in Chapter 1. The pace was going pretty well, as I could tell my general skill with the game was already improving as I breezed through each chapter of the run. Or it may just have been going well because we bought the rocket launcher and started using that. That's right, for 80,000 pesetas, we are now able to purchase the rocket launcher, and yeah, it's pretty strong. One shot Verdugo, one shot Krauser, one shot these rocks I guess, and you even one shot Sadler before getting another rocket launcher for his final phase. I won't be the first to say that using a rocket launcher is literally the coolest thing, however there is one fight strat I think I prefer. In Chapter 4, I picked up the Golden Egg, and I've been keeping a hold of that for the entire run thus far, but before entering the Ramon fight, I finally equipped it. By throwing it into his mouth as he initially charges at us, we do a massive amount of damage and put him into his stun. From here we can use the Broken Butterfly to do the rest of the damage via shots to the eye, very quickly ending the fight. After about 4.5 hours of learning, I had finished the game, ending my practice run with a time of 4:53:22. Well, it was far from optimal and I had lost a lot of time from just standing around as I watched what to do next, but it was a time to beat and also awarded me with the Beat the Game Fast achievement, so that was pretty nice as well. Of course this is not leaderboard viable, since I did the run over 2 days, which even with game time is not allowed. From here I had enough knowledge to do a run for myself, which led to the antics of day 3. Since I was moving all my stuff from university back home for summer, I took a few days off of Resident Evil, but after getting everything set up, we came back, ready to start up my first run. I felt like my preparation wasn't quite enough to get an amazing time, but when you're strapped for time, you've got to step out of what's comfortable sometimes. I started out moving into the village and immediately took my first few deaths to try and set up bingo. After that I breezed my way through the rest of the chapter, met Luis, the merchant and Ashley, and made it up to the shack. My first attempt spiraled out of control very quickly, but on my second attempt I locked in and got through pretty easily, saving a massive amount of time compared to the partial run I did on day 1. My memory of what to do was pretty good as well, as I was able to follow my scuffed route pretty confidently. However, I did have a slight issue when collecting my gemstones. In Chapter 11, you need to buy the rocket launcher in order to break down this wall, and to get that much money, you need to sell the elegant crown inlaid with 5 different colours of gemstones in order to get 100k pesetas. Since I missed a couple of opportunities to get an extra sapphire, I could only have a total of 4 different colours, reducing the amount of money I could get significantly. This didn't stop me buying the rocket launcher, and honestly money was not a very big issue for me, because I went out of my way for extra items to sell, and also stabbed like every single box I saw along the way. Of course, my first run wasn't particularly clean, but without suffering any more crazy meltdowns through the rest of it, rather the occasional death here and there, led to me finishing with a time of 3:21:31. Not the worst run in the world, but there was still so much time to save. But rather than do that today, I played a round of Mercenaries and ended my stream. After spending a day in the park feeding nuts to squirrels, day 4 had arrived and I went straight back into runs. Now to say I had a lead here would be an understatement. 5 minutes ahead out of Chapter 1, bringing that up to 8 minutes ahead out of Chapter 7, and by the time I had reached Chapter 11 I was almost 18 minutes in the green. Looking at my best possible time, I knew it would be possible for me to complete the game in less than 3 hours on my second full attempt if I just kept this pace up. And this possibility soon seemed like an inevitability as I defeated Krauser almost 24 minutes ahead and saved a full minute at the start of Chapter 15. My best possible time was now a 2:56, so it looked pretty safe, unless something disastrous happened, but luckily for me, the final chapter of Resident Evil 4 is really short and really easy to speedrun. Just buy the rocket launcher and the CQBR assault rifle, and that makes you strong enough to one-shot Sattler in the first phase. But of course, I was still in the penultimate chapter. The final thing to do before reaching Ashley is make your way past this turret. Normally you'll need to manually move it out of the way, but a faster method of doing this is to distract it with an enemy and run past in that time. We do this by knocking one of the enemies that jump down nearby and using some additional shots with the riot gun in order to push him up towards it. I kept on getting really unlucky here, getting hit just before I could run through, thus making it too slow, accidentally killing the guy because my aim was slightly off. This kept on happening until an attempt where one of the bugs walked into it and allowed me to just barely sneak past. But at this point the damage was already done, as I went into Chapter 16 with the best possible time of 3 hours and 27 seconds. Maybe I could improve my best times, but it was going to be close. With no time to waste, I ran as fast as I could through the first section and went as fast as possible with buying everything I needed. Entering Sadler, I got a best segment. My best possible time, 3 hours flat. All I had to do here was outpace my previous run by a single second. But sometimes, it just isn't meant to be. Since I was so hasty with selling, I didn't pay enough attention to my ammo, and I didn't have enough rifle bullets to safely finish Sadler off, meaning that my last hits were with the handgun. One final rocket launcher shot thanks to Ada's generosity, and I finished the fight. The best possible time of 3:00:28, with me losing a second in the escape and finishing with a final time of 3 hours and 29 seconds, incredibly close to my first milestone in this game. But hey, I've been in many similar situations before. I don't let things like this keep me down. And so yeah, I started up another run and it was a 250, a pretty convincing sub 3. The run wasn't without its issues of course, with me losing yet another 10-minute barrier to the turret skip. However, the time loss here wasn't as extreme. Perhaps the most significant mistake I made here was to do with the rocket launcher. Something I didn't know about this game is that you can't purchase the rocket launcher in subsequent chapters, and since I needed one in chapter 10 without having the money in chapter 9, I waited until just before I needed it before buying it. But that meant I didn't have access to one in the very next chapter, so I had to rush through the dynamite section, which ate through my bullets, but at least was pretty clean considering the multiple guys with chainsaws down there. Oh yeah, this awesome piece of Shemka aim also happened when trying to get rid of the Verdugo with my rocket launcher. Wow. That's crazy. Needless to say, I was able to go into day 5 knowing I had a ton of time save I could rely on, and bring my time down even lower. For the 5th day of runs, I started by showing how much time there was to save, by getting a strong lead in chapter 4, and then gradually increasing my lead, even with the occasional big time loss here and there. I made it all the way to chapter 13, a whole 5 minutes ahead. But of course, no lead is too good to lose. Going into this chapter, I realised I had no grenades, a vital ingredient for the skip I was about to perform. By throwing one down precisely, we can knock this guard towards the turret, and pass through the turret as it's shooting the guard, an almost identical concept to the skip I lost sub 3 to the day before. Since I didn't have a grenade, I couldn't attempt the skip, and resulted to doing it in the very slow casual way. Just like that, my entire lead was gone, and I couldn't clutch up enough to get ahead in the end, finishing just about a minute and a half behind my PB. Of course, late game chokes are to be expected, and so this didn't faze me too much going into another run. If anything, it seemed like the failure had powered me up, as I was almost 3 minutes ahead of my last run, half an hour in, and extended this to a huge 7.5 minute lead in chapter 7. I did also encounter a pretty odd glitch towards the end of this chapter. In the section where you have to defend Ashley as she spins wheels to raise up the bridge, I noticed that she wasn't really making any progress, so looking at her, she was stuck, standing in an A pose and refusing to move. This was very weird and I didn't know if there was a good fix for this. Obviously reloading the file was an option, but thankfully I could just shoot her in the leg and she could get herself back up and finish off the section for me. Even with these odd things happening, the time save rolled in, with my lead getting to a solid 9 minutes ahead. With just a few more good splits, I wouldn't just be on pace for a sub 250, but rather going straight to a sub 240. After a few deaths to the auto-scroller minecart, my lead went to just 7.5 minutes. More deaths in the clock tower took it to 5.5. I then proceeded to lose another minute and a half searching for some extra loot around the merchant and the boss arena, alongside missing throwing the golden egg into Ramon's mouth several times, meaning I failed the fast strat, putting me only 4 minutes ahead. I took some more deaths to the Regeneradors, trying to upgrade my keycard so I could rescue Ashley, meaning that by the end of chapter 13, I was only 2 minutes ahead. In Facility 2, you use a flash grenade to save Ashley from the floor above, but of course this run didn't really want to cooperate, and I lost more and more time since Ashley kept on being taken away, leading to many game overs. Plus 126. My run was falling apart. But I didn't want to lose another run to late game like this. I was determined to save it. With a far better Krauser fight than what my PB could offer, I actually managed to bring the run slightly ahead out of chapter 14, extending my lead just a little bit in chapter 15. Of course, the turret skip had potential to screw me over again, and it looked like that may be the case as my first attempt accidentally killed the guy, and the second had me position Leon too far away, so I couldn't sneak past in time. By the third, we made it past, which was just enough to keep me in the green, 21 seconds ahead into the final chapter. But here, I decided it wasn't time to mess around. Gold split for going into Saddler, and tying my bets for both phases of the Saddler fight. All that was left was the escape sequence, which I breezed through, finishing with a pretty small PB of 249.26. Even though this was my first sub 250, and my first sub 5 chapter 16, my feelings on this run were pretty mixed, as you can imagine. I'm not sure if I should feel happy about this, because I got a PB and I got a new 10-minute barrier, or if I should be annoyed, because this run is like the stupidest thing I've ever performed, ever. So I'm conflicted, chat. I'm very conflicted. I'll beat it. Nah, next stream though. By like 10 minutes, I hope. I should do, at least. With the time save and my PB being very back-weighted, I knew that on day 6 I'd be able to continue runs even if they had a bad start. But even with that, I just couldn't get one going for quite a while. This happens in speedrunning. Days where you're just stuck doing the same early game things over and over, and here the main culprit was the first fight at the village. I would just get overwhelmed without having the firepower to bring things back when they go south. My attempt counter grew and grew, and I eventually was able to get past, but then lost my run in chapter 5 since Ashley kept on getting grabbed, leading to several game overs, and since I was already pretty frustrated, I just decided to start again and hopefully have a full mental reset as well. The next run I got out of early game kept up with my PB, but a death in the shack and some deaths to Mendez and the Bella sisters in chapter 5 and 6 took me all the way to 5 minutes behind. Little by little I brought the run back, and it looked like I may have actually had a shot at being in the green, with a whole minute and a half of time save in the double Garrador fight coming up. The objective of this fight is to get a clean shot on their exposed worm thing with the broken butterfly, and then throw a flash grenade to kill. But with how much damage they deal, and how weirdly they move around, they are a massive pain sometimes, and so I took a massive chunk of time loss here. Just as I thought I might get ahead, I was sent back to being far behind. This happened yet again with the double Giganti fight, where I lost another massive chunk of time, since the second one wasn't stunned over the lava pit, forcing me to try and get the kill normally. If I had just played a little better here, I would have gotten a huge bit of time save from not dying to the minecart section, and then I would have saved even more time by getting a big best segment on Krauser. Well, third time's the charm, right? Surely I'll be able to actually put myself ahead in chapter 12, considering I had over 2.5 minutes of time to save in Clock Tower. Oh. Thankfully, this constant disappointment of choking away easy time save for 3 chapters straight went away in the very next one, and from there my lead grew and grew, ending with a time of 2:44.13, actually finishing as a pretty big PB overall. Of course, I was still far from being satisfied, and wanted to see at least a sub 240, and so I just needed the last day of my runs to go to plan. The time had come, the final day to put all I had learnt from my practice and runs into context, and I would hopefully have a good time at the end of it all, or at least a better time compared to what I finished day 6 with. Luckily at the start of my stream and after a few resets, I got off to a good start, that looked to be on a sub 240 pace. But yet again, that final turret skip in chapter 15 messed me up for the third 10-minute barrier in a row. I wasn't too annoyed by missing the trick, but rather the heaps of time save I had leading up to this, which stole the time away from me. This didn't stop my motivation going into runs, even with a ton of them dying at the start. I'd start up, get through the first few splits, and die in some way or another that was probably very preventable if I was just better at the game. More runs started, more runs were dying, some making it further than others, but all with the common theme of none making it to the end. It got to the point where I had time for just one more run to make something work, and finish off my grind with a bang. The first chapter wasn't too impressive, but I was still sitting there with quite a lead. Chapter after chapter, it just continued to get larger and larger. As a matter of fact, I was still taking deaths and had to reload the file plenty of times thanks to mistakes, but overall my lead just got better and better. After my best ever double Gigantes fight, where I threw grenades at the armoured guy until he died, and then used a flash grenade to stun the other before dipping him in the lava, I found myself 6 minutes ahead, with even more time to save later down the line. One of the scariest parts about chapter 13 is the section where you upgrade the keycard to level 3. Whilst we're waiting for the upgrade to finish processing, tons of enemies will swarm the room, including Regeneradors, and unfortunately I took too much damage too quickly and endured what is perhaps the death that loses the most time in the whole chapter. Still, I was able to keep holding onto my lead going into chapter 14, and then was able to almost double it by just throwing a flashbang in the right place so that the dude dropped Ashley. Chapter 15 I also played a little greedy and died a couple times, but by this point my lead was too good to lose. I got a first try turret skip and went into the final chapter 7 minutes ahead. I did end up playing this chapter a little bit safe, making sure to craft some extra rifle ammo for the final fight. I may have lost 5 seconds, but after getting through both phases, it was now time for the escape. For the section off foot, all I needed to do was hold forward and just dodge out of the way of this one enemy. Just like that. The water scooter too, I just needed to make sure I'm not bumping on walls and on rocks, and since I've never taken a death here, I didn't exactly plan on starting now. And so I finished off with a 7-minute PB, which crushed the sub 240 barrier, ending my 7 days of speedrunning Resident Evil 4 with a time I'm pretty satisfied with. This final time was just about enough to put me in the top 50 of the speedrun.com leaderboards, which isn't super impressive, but still could be a lot worse considering the time I put in. I think my biggest issue here, honestly, was spending too much time doing runs, and not enough time spent practicing and doing the small things, which would have added up across the run. The other benefit of this is the fact I would have become a lot more consistent as a result of the practice, and so wouldn't have had such extreme time losses in my runs. The honest reason I didn't grind too much off stream is just because after like 6 hours of runs I was pretty exhausted. But just spending half as long streaming would have probably given me the time to learn more things and bring my time much closer to the world record. In spite of that, and in spite of how frequently I die in my runs, Resident Evil 4 wasn't too bad to pick up and learn, so if you're interested in the speedrun, or just want the achievement, I'd recommend giving this one a go, especially because you can play it super safe by grabbing every box in sight, and also without there being too many tricks you have to learn, at least if you're doing no major glitches. But yeah, mission almost completed, all that's left to do now is ride off my water scooter into the sunset. Thanks for watching.